Hey kids, Mr. Rhodes here. Today's project is going to be creating a draggable game. We're also going to learn about blocks in our coding. And blocks are just simple little pieces of code that we want to reuse over and over. What are we going to learn to do that? Well, we are going to create the world's most intense dodgeball game ever. I know you kids are probably all missing physical education class with Mr. Klingbill, but don't worry, this game is going to remind you of third period, no problem. So what is our game? Well, when I hit the green flag, our hero here, they will be dragged towards my mouse pointer, and then they have a ton of balls flying at them. And then if they get hit by a ball, it'll tell you the exact time there is. So we can be super competitive with our games when you create them, and yours will be timed down to the thousandths of a second. And we're going to learn how to do that as well. So we're going to learn a couple new things, nothing too crazy, just a little couple tricks to help us make our code more efficient. That's what we're always looking after. Well, this game doesn't look too hard. Let's jump into it and start coding it out. Well, kids, the first thing we're going to do here is get rid of our cat, and we're going to load up our two sprites. One of them I'm going to paint, and that's going to be our dodgeball. Now, our dodgeball has to be pretty tiny, so you're going to have to zoom in quite a bit. It's going to be a circle. We don't want any outline on our circle here, so we're going to hit that little X out there, and then we can pick whatever color we want. Let's go with our North Royalton purple there. I'm going to drag out a circle and make it basically 2 pixels by 2 pixels big. And if you see over here, that's pretty tiny, that's pretty small. We want to drag around. We don't want it to be an impossible game. We just want it to be a little hard. As always, we want to make sure we're naming stuff correctly. This is going to be our dodgeball. Let's do this in camel case. Dodgeball. This is our costume one, so we have everything named up. Second thing we need to do here is we need to add another character or our hero. You can make this to be anything you want. Same with your dodgeball. We're going to get into the actual specifics of what you have to do with this game, but you can pick whatever you want. I am going to pick my little friend. Where did my little friend go? The hugging friend right there. Casey, that's the one I'm going to pick. We're going to go to the costume here. You got to zoom out a little. We're zoomed in creepily. I like this costume here, so I'm going to go ahead and delete the other 3. And I'm going to rename this one Hero, because our hero has to dodge the ball. This is our size here. If you look, this is huge and not very proportional to our dodgeball. So let's drag our arrow here and make this a little smaller. And that looks a little closer to what it should be. I'm going to put this on the circle on the origin there, just so we're all lined up when we go. So my dodgeball, as you could see, that would be roughly the size, maybe a little smaller, but we're pretty close with that. Didn't look like this all caught in. There we go, hero. So we have our character and our enemy there, or our dodgeball, all in. So the only thing left to do now really is to code our program up. I'm going to start with our dodgeball. What we're going to do in this one is we're going to learn how to do blocks, because we don't want just one dodgeball to go around. We want a bunch. We're going to get to that in a second. Let's just code this up as normal, and then we'll add the block last, so we understand kind of how it goes. Now, normally what we do, well, when the green flag is clicked here, we would want our ball to come out. Now, our ball here, we want to go to what? Probably we want to go to a random position, because we don't know who's around. And this is house rules dodgeball, by the way. This is 360 dodgeball, no line dodgeball here, so everything goes everywhere. So we kind of want this to go to a random position. What this random position should do, as you can see, it's taking the ball kind of all over the screen. Now let's get that ball to kind of point in a direction here. So we want this to point in a direction. If you remember, we have a piece of code to point in direction. Well, what direction are we going to point it into? Well, we want to go between pretty much 0 and 360. That is an operator. So we're going to go down here and we're going to pick a random number between 360 and negative 360. That gets us going to a random spot, but not movement. So let's take care of our movement now. We want a repeat until command here. And we want to repeat until we're touching an edge. So that's a sensing, and when it is touching the edge, we just want it to move a step. As you can see, that starts to take care of random movement. Let's go ahead and do a turn here of 180 degrees and move 5 steps. Let's see what happens. So you can see it's moving, but it's slow. And we're going to take care of that movement speed here in a little bit. Now there's one last thing to do here. We need to create a clone of myself. This right here goes with the blocks. And really, we are going to make this into a block that all of these little balls are going to do. So if we go to block here, we're going to make a block, and we are going to call this ball clone, because this is our dodgeball clone. And we want this to run without screen refresh. Please make sure this is checked when you do this. We're going to hit OK. And basically what define block is saying we want a series of commands we can repeat, and we can just call this one thing here. Anytime we call ball clone, it'll just run this part right here. That means when the green flag is clicked, we're going to go and we are going to forever run our little block here, clone, but we don't want it to run immediately, because if it runs immediately, it gets crazy. And that is nuts. And we don't want that to happen. What we want it to do is to wait a second or two before it happens. So I'm just going to go over here to wait, and really a good number is anything between 0.3 and 0.1. 0.4 up, it's a little slow. 0.21, it gets a little crazy. So now you can see the balls are just going, but they're not moving now. And we have to deal with that movement. So when I start as a clone, and we have a little block over here, and that is under our controls. So when I start as a clone, the first thing we want to do here is we have to deal with the ball where it's going here. So as you can see, along the edge here, it's appearing. And we really want that to kind of hide before it goes. So like all of mine, I'm going to use the hide command here. And I want it to show on my clone. So when it starts as a clone, I want the clone to show, but I don't want it to kind of keep it every time it goes. And I want the same thing my clone to do as the other one. I want it to repeat until, and that's as it's touching the edge. So we're going to go back to sensing, and when it is touching the edge. We're going to move 5 steps. And then after we do that, we want to delete this clone. So back under here, delete this clone. Now what should happen when I click this, the ball should travel. Nothing's happening here. I notice if I look down at my degrees, I have it as 1800. Now that we hit start, you'll see it'll go. It was just spinning around like crazy there. So now you can see I have my dodgeballs flying from all of my imaginary characters are out here. And they're really trying to get into there. Now if you wanted to slow this down a little, if we just want to one step, you can see anytime that we change this number here in our clones, because that's the important one. 4 or 5 ends up being the best, but again, you can choose any number you want. We will talk about that at the end of the video. That so far is our dodgeball, but we have to worry about our hero here. They have to be able to move around. And as fun as it is to just drag it like this, that's really not how games are played. And what we're going to do is we're going to create something so that our hero is always going to be pulled towards our mouse pointer. And it's also going to be pulled at a certain velocity. So it's not going to instantly snap towards it, though it will sometimes. It should go gradually towards it at an even speed no matter where I'm going. So we can drag our mouse around here and our character will follow wherever our mouse is going. Creating this is a little bit different because we're going to create a bunch of variables. And we're going to use those variables to store some information, and then we're going to call that, and then we're going to update those variables. So there's a couple things we're going to have to do here. I'm going to head over to my variables here, and I'm going to start making variables. Now the first 2 variables I want to know are going to be the original X position and the original Y position. So I'm going to call those OGX, OGY. I am also going to create a timer because on mine, my timer is going to be done a little different on this one. Before we set timers to set the time repeated in loops. This time we're going to use the internal built timer to grab that information. So we're going to have another variable, time. I'm also going to make this one available on the cloud because this one we can ultimately score and see who does the longest. This is just telling me, hey, it's only going to do numbers, not letters. Our next one is just going to be our velocity. How fast are we going? And velocity, if I spell it right, velocity is going to be how fast we're traveling, distance over time. And then the last thing we're going to need is our new X and Y coordinates in relation to our velocity. So we're going to have our X velocity and we're going to have our Y velocity. Now we're going to need time out here, but all the rest of these we are not going to need. And I'm just going to click my time. Again, if you remember, you can double click on it and it will turn it into the 3 different versions you have: a slider, the name with the variable, and then just the variable. We're just going to use the variable here. Now that we got our variable set, we are going to set our character. So like a lot of things that we do, when the green flag is clicked, we want our character to go to this position right here. When they're dragged out, we can just click the green flag and they'll go back to the right position. That means we can drag our character out, but when we hit the green flag, it'll always start in the same spot. Always helpful to do. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to set some of our variables to 0. Much like setting our position, we want to set our velocities to 0. So I'm going to put 3 out here. The 3 we're going to do are going to be velocity, our X velocity, and our Y velocity. Next part I want to deal with is going to be the draggable part, where when I click my mouse down, I want this character to follow me around. But I want it to be a kind of reduced velocity. I don't want it to go right at it as I'm going. I want it to be just a hair behind what I do. Not much, just a little. That means I am going to drag out now a if statement here. And this one is going to be if our mouse is down, then we want to change our velocity to 1. So we're going to go over here and we're going to change our velocity to 1. Now this has to be happening the entire time, not just once. So we have to put this in a forever block as we're doing it. Let's just see what happens when I do this. Now, nothing's happening right now. We have to take care of the movement towards it. Because all it's saying down right now is saying when the mouse is down, we want to change the velocity. We haven't actually told it what to do. So what we really wanted to do is we wanted to point towards our mouse. So we're going to go over here, point in direction, and we want to point in the direction of the mouse pointer. So let's go ahead and click. Now you can see our character is going wherever our mouse is pointed towards. Let's deal with that velocity between the mouse pointer and our character. So we're going to go back down to variables, and we want to set now our regular velocity, and we don't want that to be full velocity. We want that to be a velocity times 0.9, just a little bit below it. So let's go to our operator here and our multiplier, and we want our variable to be this times 0.9. Next, we're going to set our original X and Y to positions. So again, I'm going to drag to set 2. And this time we just want to set the original X and the original Y now to both the X position and the Y position down here. Now when we can do this, we can move based off that velocity. So we are going to move velocity steps. Let's see if anything's happening here. Oh, as you can see, it's coming over here. So we're getting close, but as you can see, it's a little clunky. Let's refine that a little more. Let's drag in 2 change blocks. And we're going to change the X velocity and the Y velocity by the X position minus the original X, and we're going to divide that in half. Now, if you remember your order of operators, there is ways when we divide, subtract, multiply that we have to do something. This is one of those cases where we have to follow those orders. What I'm going to do here is I am going to go down to my operators. I'm going to drag out a divided and a subtraction. And what I want is the X position minus our original X position, and we want that divided by 6. I'm going to drag that in here. I'm going to duplicate just because I can get rid of these two quickly. I'm going to go to my original Y position, and I also need my Y position here. That's not done. Remember, we have to divide it. So we're going to get a division down here and drag that in. Let's see what effect this has on our program. As you can see, this is dragging it quicker the further out it is. So this is kind of getting us there. So it snaps to us quick instead of just going super fast. It'll still snap a little, and we're going to take care of it and refine it just a little more. Let's go ahead and go to our positions here. We are going to set our original X and Y. And then we're going to change the X by. So we're going to go down to our change. We want to change the X and our Y by our velocity. So all we're doing here is just adding to our variables, storing our variables, and then calling them. Now, just like before, we want that speed to be quick, but not as quick as our mouse. We want it to be a little behind, a little tracking. So we are once again going to drag out 2 more set blocks here. And this time we want to set that X and Y velocity to 0.9 of it. Drag out 2 multiplication ones here. And then we are going to set our operator again, XV and XY. That one fell out there. 2.9. Now when we go to our green flag, look at how nice that goes towards it. So anytime we click down our mouse, it'll come towards it. So as we go through, anytime we click it, our mouse down, it's going to come right towards our actual mouse. We're not done yet. We still have 2 more things we want to do. One, whenever an enemy's ball hits us, we want the game to end, and we want to get the timer going, because right now it's just going to 42, and if I click it again, it will drop down to 0, and we want that to be into those thousandths of a point. So how do we do that? Well, let's take care of our timer first. This is going to be a little different than we've done it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag out a block here. We're going to set time. And we're going to set time to what? Well, if you notice, it has 3 points to it. And there is a rounding block here on our actual code. And that will round it to the timer. And if you look at the timer goes up to 1/1000th of a second. So that's just a little helpful thing there. Get rid of that. We're going to set this here inside our block right under the forever to start it. So now it's not going to do anything until we get an exact time, but our timer's there. So our final little block that we want to put in here is going to be another if block. And this one, we are going to repeat again, if what? If we are touching the dodgeball, we are going to set our time right here to our timer. Then we're going to broadcast a message of stopping. So we're going to go to our events. We're going to broadcast a new message here, and our message is going to be done. After that, we want to stop all of our scripts. So we're going to drag a stop all block in there. This is going to go all the way at the bottom there. So now if we hit our start button here, once it hits a purple ball there, we have our time set to the 0.003 of a second. Now you're going to see a rogue ball there. Every once in a while, this is going to happen. This is where our broadcast done message is going to come. So what I want to do here is I'm going to go back to my dodgeball script, and I'm going to kind of make a little kind of fake thing here. So when I receive this message done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here, and there's this little part here to add extensions. And I am going to add a pen extension here. We're going to play with a couple more of these down the road, but right now we're just going to play with the pen. And I'm going to hit erase all. And really this is doing nothing. It's just saying to bring up this operation, erase anything that the pen might have drawn, which it hasn't, but it will stop the balls from coming. So let's try this again. And you'll see nothing will be coming into the screen afterwards. No rogue balls. Let's test it again, make sure we don't get that. And we seem to be doing okay. So that right there is for my draggable game, but instead of just a regular draggable game, how far away you are from the mouse will determine how fast you are going, which is a nice little twist on it. So we learned a couple new things here. We learned about blocks, and the block that we had here was our ball clone, and this basically was a code for a ball, and we made it randomly pop around the screen and go. So that was our first new little thing that we learned here. We learned about the new extension of the pen, and then we learned a little bit about velocity here and the dragging of a sprite in order to play a game. So that is the bare bones version of the game I created. Let's go ahead and talk about the game that you have to create. Well, kids, what are you going to do for your game? Well, what we learned today was how to make a variable speed draggable game. It was a little twist on a classic dragging game. This one you just had to move your mouse around and we got a little different velocity. You're going to create a game with the same kind of idea. Not the exact same kind of game. I don't want to see dodgeball games. Yours could be something like a spaceship traveling through space. Maybe it is a person running away from other people or zombies. Who knows? Do whatever you like. But you have to have your own original game. So what are some of the other things you're going to need? Well, you're going to need an intro screen for your game. You got to say and tell your user how to play it. You need a background for your game, something I didn't have in mind. A theme for your game, we just talked about this. Again, cannot be the same exact theme as my game. Yours should be a little different. So again, take your time, make it a little original. When you press the mouse down, the sprite should move towards your mouse arrow. The sprite should also stop moving when the button is released. You should have multiple objects that need avoided. You need to use a block in your code. The sprite can move around your screen freely. Your game uses some sort of velocity, and the game ends when your sprite is touched. Pretty simple there, nothing crazy. If you want to make your game a little more complicated, you can reset the game without hitting the green flag. You can have different types of objects to avoid. Maybe you can get points by touching certain objects. You can add any effects to your different sprites and music to your game. Honestly, you know me, you can create whatever you want as long as it kind of stays under the purview of what we're learning. And that's it, kids. That's what we're going to be working on for this week. As always, if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I can't wait to see what you kids code. See you in class.